Okay, good
Hello,
morning, everyone.
everyone.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Ryan Dividoc. I'm the supervisor for the Planning, Zoning, and Land Use Unit within the Planning and Local Business Development Division in Oakland County. Welcome to today's virtual planners gathering, Site Design for Emergency Services. Just a few reminders, the meeting is being recorded and will be made available on our website. And if you have any questions, please use the chat function in Zoom and direct your question to Jim Schaefer. Jim will moderate a question and answer session after the presentations have completed. So let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. We have Michael Kamenec, Emergency Management Specialist with Oakland County's Emergency Management and Homeland Security Office. And we also have Patrick Riney, who's a Plan Review Manager for the Michigan Bureau of Fire Services. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Michael, the floor is yours.
Morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So my name is Mike Kamenec. Like was said, I'm an emergency management specialist with the county. I have experience going to sites, doing site assessments. I'm certified in critical infrastructure protection, as well as what we're going to talk about a little bit today, crime prevention through environmental design. Next slide. So crime prevention through environmental design, also known as CPTED. This is a design philosophy used to deter crime in a built environment. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. Really, we're not looking at total crime prevention. We're looking at deterring crime, especially those opportunity-driven crimes. We're looking at reducing perceived risks. That's for the community where they feel safe, unsafe, those sort of things. And then also increasing the community's total quality of life. So CPTED is really based in three theories. One is the theory of risky places. This basically says most of your crime occurs in a very small area, right? So about 5% of your area might account for 50% of your total crime statistics. Broken windows theory, popular in the 80s, 90s in New York City. This really focuses on the maintenance portion of CPTED, in that if you have a blighted or rundown area, it's less likely that people might at least perceive that there's care in that environment, and therefore more likely to see crime increases because the offenders are thinking that they're less likely to get caught. Where we're at today is a situational crime prevention theory, and this is more target hardening, right? Make it harder or riskier for an offender to uh, go out and commit a crime. So we're looking at layout, lighting, visibility, access control, how they're going to enter an area and potentially offend. Next slide. So depending on who your researcher is, CPTED could be 3 to 8 pillars. We'll focus on these three here. So access control, we're talk about how do we manage traffic on a site? What do our doors, windows, gates look like, security alarms, those sort of things. Surveillance, this is identifying the crime that occurs on a site and making it easier for the people that occupy the site to see, those abnormalities and take action. And then territoriality, this is your ownership of space. I'll pretty much refer to it as ownership of space going forward. This is making sure, going back to the broken windows theory, that the space at least looks cared for in an attempt to deter any sort of criminal activity. Next slide. So when we talk about access control, we're talking about managing who, when, and how someone can enter a site. So that's your deter, detect, defend kind of ways to go about designing your site. When we look at it, we're looking at kind of a layered security approach. And remember, when you're designing the site, you're looking at your public space versus private space. These things are going to look totally different from each other, with less security. And then as you go more inward towards those mission critical areas of a site, you're going to see an increase in security. So when we look at, for example, a retail facility, you're going to want the public to come in. They're going to be able to park. So maybe your first kind of level of security or deterrent might be the storefront itself, locks, windows, those sort of things. And then as you get to a back room where you might have cash or other merchandise, that's where you have those higher levels of security. When you're looking at like a private space or critical infrastructure, you might see fencing, gating, additional signage to make sure that you're moving people in the way that they should be moved on site, right? So you might have a gate with a guard, they come in. You might have a badge access into a building where the employee can gain access, and then further into the building itself. So that building envelope, you might have a server room or anything like that where the badge for an employee might not work, but it would work for management or IT. What we want to do is really minimize entrances. Pat's going to talk later about fire codes and exits and those sort of things. But really, once again, that wayfinding piece, getting people to move in the way that we want them to move so that we can identify those potential offenders trying to gain alternative access. Speaking of which, this might go more towards the operators of the facilities, but making sure that we're designing facilities so that those alternative means of access, like dumpsters, ladders, anything like that, awnings, trees, where they can gain access to a second level and bypass your first layer of security. Want to make sure that we're avoiding those as well. Doors and windows, once again, making sure that people are going to a main entrance as opposed to, a side entrance, anything like that. Windows, making sure that they are, can be locked if needed, working with the local fire and police departments. You potentially have impact resistant glass, and those sort of things. Next slide. We talk about traffic on site. Really, our biggest concern is high-speed avenues of approach. So this is kind of a straight roadway where a vehicle could pick up speed and crash into a building or crash into a crowded area, as we've seen in New Orleans or any sort of thing like that with the act of terrorism. So to do that, you want to make sure you have these kind of hard corners. You don't want those direct lanes that might approach a building or might approach an area where people gather. So offsetting those things, designing the parking lot so maybe cars are parked directly in front of a building entrance or parallel to the building entrance, so you don't have that lane. Once again, signage directing people where to go. If you can't kind of offset the building or anything like that from a roadway, you could look at bollards. So either the straight poles or like the picture on the bottom right there, you have alternative means, planters, and the like. These can be specifically rated to stop vehicle traffic. So if anyone does attempt any sort of ramming activity, they would be stopped. And then your natural slowing measures, so chicanes, traffic circles, pavement treatment, like in the bottom left. And then when you're looking at buildings, typically you want to have some standoff from the building, one that gives emergency responders a fire lane to approach, as well as giving space to prevent any sort of improvised explosive from a vehicle, so like a car bomb, and then any sort of accidental damage. So, if you have parking up against the building, someone goes to the park, hits the accelerator instead of the brake, causes damage to the building, potentially harms people. So you want to avoid that as well. Next slide. Surveillance. So this can be natural or mechanical. When we say mechanical, that's your camera. So I'm not going to touch too much on that. Only piece is when we see cameras on a site, we want to make sure that they're monitored in some way. Some people tend to just use them as investigative purposes. That's great, but they don't really deter crime or detect crime in any way. So, when we look at natural surveillance, you're looking at windows. You want open sight lines and defined property lines. So you don't want, for example, a forested area up against the building or anything like that that might prevent someone inside the building from detecting a person approaching. When we look at foliage, there's what's known as the 2 foot 6 foot rule. So any vegetation that's kind of ground level, so your bushes and the like, you want to make sure that those are maintained at 2 feet or less. And then any trees that you have on property as well, you want to make sure the limbs are at least 6 feet off the ground. Next slide. Lighting. So lighting is kind of specific to certain areas. So you just want to make sure that's appropriate for the area, that it's uniform and it's consistent throughout the site. Uh, Typically, this is measured in foot candles. So open spaces, you want 1 foot candle. Your surface parking lots are 3 to 5. When you look at parking garages, it's 5 foot candles. You want to be kind of careful when you're looking at lighting within parking garages. Typically, you'll have beams or anything, some overhead obstructions. So you want to make sure that the lights are installed at the lowest level you can. Walkways are around 5. Entrances, you want at least 10 foot candles. Ideally, it's about twice the ambient light level. So you want to make sure that entrances are identified. Typically, there's cameras pointed at that. So you want to make sure that if someone enters, you can identify them. And then it helps with the wayfinding purpose, right? So if someone enters a site, they know kind of where they're going. So they're not trying to even accidentally enter the building from a wrong side. Light types, LED and metal halide give us the best CRI, which is kind of how the light mimics the sun. So it gives us a true color perspective. So if a camera or someone has to identify, for example, the color of a vehicle, that gives us the best opportunity to do so. Once again, LEDs preferred. Metal halide have restrike time. So if the power does go out in the area, it's going to take some time for those to kick back on. And typically your camera system is going to kick on before the lights do, which prevents some sort of those identification things. And then the actual type of light fixture itself, you want to make sure it has shielding so that we're illuminating the areas that we definitely want to illuminate. So you can see the picture on the top right there. That's kind of your globe style light. When you have trespassing, it takes the human eye a little bit to adjust to that light. So you can see when the person puts their hand over that light, creates that shielding effect, and you can see that there's a person actually standing underneath that light. All right, next slide. And the last piece, this is the territoriality, or like I said, ownership of space. Going back to the broken windows theory, right? This is making sure that the area is cared for somebody, or appears that like it's cared by somebody. So we can use different ways to go about this. Landscaping or art is great, right? Making sure that you can get some local artists in there, care for it. It brings other members of the public to that area, which then would prevent some of those crimes of opportunity that we spoke about. If you do choose landscaping for this, make sure that you're not using loose objects like stones or anything that can be used as a weapon or to gain entry by breaking a window or anything like that. Maintenance is a big piece with this as well. So making sure that we're keeping the area up, we're keeping it clean, using graffiti resistant materials, cleaning up the graffiti if we have anything like that. And then working with your community leaders for these, what we call positive activity generators. So you got movie nights in the park or any other like festivals, fairs, those sort of things that get the public to the area to prevent, kind of those lone acts of crime. All right. Next slide. So some ways that we can kind of go about this and see where our gaps are. 2 items, you got a CEPTED survey. This is typically for a built environment. So this is something where our office, for example, might go out to a nonprofit or house of worship, right? A site that's already kind of built out and say, here's, your security gaps. Here's what you can do to improve security on the site to prevent crime. You can also go through a CEPTED site review. So these are proposed sites. So when someone submits a proposal or anything like that for a new site plan, having elements for CEPTED for crime prevention is very beneficial. So you can check through, make sure that the lighting is there, the sight lines are there, and all that sort of stuff. And then community engagement, making sure that your public safety pieces are part of your community engagement. So not only hot spotting where the crime is actually occurring, but where your community, perceives that crime is occurring. So what's safe to the community, what's unsafe, right? This will help drive projects or ideas, and you can kind of revitalize areas that aren't utilized by the public because those areas are unsafe. So kind of doing those ownership of space things, getting the community to participate in those functions is key. Next slide. All right, this next point, we're gonna kind of talk about, how do we get funding? What can we do at a local level here? So next slide. So with funding, there are some grants out there. Not many grants are specific to SEPTED per se. Like you're not going to find a grant that says, "Hey, we want SEPTED projects. Submit all your SEPTED projects." A lot of times with this, public safety is or lower levels of crime are a secondary benefit of what we're doing. So when you look at community improvement, beautification, that's great. We want our communities to look nice, but also we want them to look nice and deter crime, right? And make sure people feel safe in those areas. Some national grants that you can look into, nonprofit security grant. That's kind of what I was talking about before with those SEPTED reviews. It's going out to a built structure. This one's typically 501c3s or houses of worship, and making sure that their security is up to snuff because they might not have the funds to actually do that themselves. You have the port security grant program, transit security grant program. So if you deal with mass transit or commercial shipping, anything like that, you can look into those. Community development block grants, once again, those community improvement grants. When you look at schools, there's a school violence prevention program that you can get grant funds to increase security there. U.S. Conference of Mayors occasionally has public safety focused grants. The Burn Criminal Justice Innovation Program, that one is kind of more SEPTED focused, and that's a full-on study. So you would have to come up with an idea, submit it to them, implement the program, and then there's sort of analyzing the results, right? Making sure that your project or your proposal is effective. And then the DOT one, so we can even get into DOT, Safe Streets and Roads for All. I'll touch on that in a second, but you can use that to potentially increase safety in your area as well. Next slide. So some local grants, Michigan Economic Development Corporation has a revitalization and placemaking program. So this mission is to rehabilitate vacant and underutilized, blighted and historic structures, and the development of permanent place-based infrastructure associated with traditional downtowns, social zones, outdoor dining, and place-based public spaces. So all that kind of sounds similar to that ownership of space, revitalizing an area, the theory of risky places where you might have some worn down areas, maybe the crime is happening there. How can we utilize these grant programs to make it look nice, deter crime in those areas? So a couple local ones, Dearborn Warren Avenue Improvement Grants. So this was that DOT Safe grant, Safe Streets grant. So in addition to, increasing transit safety, so adding bike lanes and those sort of things for pedestrians and vehicles on the road, it included a facade improvement program. So businesses could apply and get grant money to make their storefronts generally look nicer, right? To deter crime or a criminal act on their facility, right? So that included improvements to lighting, awning, signage, and the actual facade of the building. And then Lansing did a similar program. So they did dollar for dollar up to $15,000 in their downtown area. Typically, when this goes through, it goes to a committee that you'll set up and you'll review and approve projects. So most of these grants, like Dearborn, they're a pass through for a federal grant, but you can also look at using community foundations or even if you have like some local grants as well. Next slide. The other route you can go is ordinances. We're starting to see this more and more where you had SEPTED kind of focused ordinances. So Grand Rapids in 2019 put into place theirs. So these are typically targeted at certain areas or industries. So Grand Rapids one applies to areas that can sell tobacco, alcohol, marijuana. So if you think gas stations, liquor stores, those sort of things. Body works places, and then businesses that are open past midnight. And then there's a way for if you're not one of those places, you can potentially enter into this program if you're deemed a chronic public safety issue. So if you're in this program, you have to go through, you have to improve lighting on your site. You have to have a maintenance plan on your site as well. You have to have certain requirements with cameras, how long you keep that footage for, who's monitoring it, alarms, drop safes for cash. And then one of the unique ones here is window coverage. So typically when you go to a gas station or liquor store, there's going to be posted posters, signage, advertising deals or anything like that. In Grand Rapids, that window coverage has to be less than 70 or less than 25%. So it has to be 75% open so that the people inside, workers, customers can see what's going on outside. So they can see someone approaching, they can see if anything's going on in the parking lot. So this applies to the signs there as well as shelving. So if you have tall shelving up against the window, that counts as window covering as well. And then they introduce fines with this. So the first one, it's a civil infraction, and then any additional penalties is a misdemeanor, $500 or 90 days in jail if you do not follow their SEPTED ordinance. Next slide. Florida also introduced one this year. This applies to multifamily dwellings, so think apartment complexes. So this is for safety of the residents. So the landlords are required to install cameras at entrances, exits, and they're required to keep the footage for 30 days. They're required to provide adequate lighting for common areas in the parking lot. Each dwelling door, so each apartment has to have a peephole and a 1-inch deadbolt, and their windows also have to lock. And if they have sliding doors, those also have to lock. And then some type of access control for pools. So whether that's like a key card access or a gate around the pool, the landlords are required to install those. Next. And the last one, if you're looking to, install any ordinances, there is an ISO standard for SEPTED now. This is fairly new. So it's not going to replace any local ordinances. Really, this gives you best practices. So if you wanted to, go back and look at, hey, what's the adequate lighting levels, or what's the, best practice for lighting levels, or if you're looking at installing bollards, there are standards for, what kind of force those have to take to be considered, eligible to, stop a vehicle and the like. All right. And that is my presentation on SEPTED. I'll hand it over to Pat.
Hey, Pat, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So as Ryan said, I'm currently with the state of Michigan. I manage the plan review division for the state fire marshal's office. Prior to that, I spent 28 years with the West Bloomfield Fire Department, retired as fire marshal, and was cross-trained as police officer there and worked for a period of time in Grosse Pointe Shores as a public safety officer. So I kind of got a little bit of public safety world covered. And so today, as I found through my dealings, most of the codes that we deal with are based on disasters throughout the world and country. If you want to go ahead and advance there, Ryan. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the fundamentals of site planning for an actual site, pre-planning for vehicle access and public safety access into the site, and then site selection and facility design. Go ahead, move forward there, Ryan. And like I said, this impacts all areas of public safety, police, fire, and EMS. Many times, police and fire are at odds with certain things in how we look at the site access and site development. And as you'll notice, there will be a part where it's blatantly obvious, kind of the difference between what Mike said and what I will say on site access. EMS kind of they follow the fire side in being able to get in and get out quickly, where police will tend to try and limit the access in and control how people move around. Go ahead and move. So in this, there are two major how should I say, recognized documents in this planning for emergency services. One is the International Fire Code, which is based off the International Building Code. Currently, Michigan is under the Michigan Building Code, which is an adapted version of the International Building Codes. And then NFPA 1, which also is mirrors and in many ways sets the tone for the International Fire Code, because NFPA has many other codes that go along that mirror or that both fire codes use in their documents. The other thing to look at when developing a site are any local zoning and building restrictions. So all three areas come into play when trying to identify what you're going to do with the site. Go ahead, Brian. We're going to be dealing with the fire department access lanes and marking, a little bit with the water supply and how to and what to look for with that. Fire hydrant spacing. We'll touch a little bit on that. And these documents apply to both the public and private access into a site. And a reminder that the access and access roads must be maintained at all times. So go ahead, Ryan. So the first thing is in looking at the building is when preparing the site, the code requires that the apparatus or the fire service must have access to within 150 feet of all points of the building. This is critical, and it does limit to what you can do and how you can build on the site. Many times, the putting in the roads and the access sites can only be managed in a certain way. So within 150 feet of all points of that, and there are reasons why that, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Go ahead, Ryan. So as you can see with this one, there are two thoughts when with the fire service when they show up on your site. There's what they call a forward lay, where they put a whole bunch of a big hose on the back. They drop a coupling at the hydrant and drive to the front of the building, or they have a whole bunch of little hose on the back of the truck and stop at the hydrant and stretch a whole lot of little hose around the building. And so there's only a limited amount of hose that can go on there. And like I said, most of the time, that's within 150 feet of ground level. So that's kind of the theory behind the 150 feet is you're limited as to how much hose you can carry on the back of that truck. Go ahead, Ryan. Fire department access roads everywhere. Pretty much any road out there now can be considered a fire access road. As in the definition down below, fire lane, the fire department access road, which is marked and approved signs or other approved notices. But you'll notice on the next line down, the term fire lane is no longer utilized. It's more or less a fire department access road, which provides access to from the fire station or from the station all the way through to the whichever emergency site that they're traveling to. There are regulations as to how wide those roads can be, how much weight they have to carry, and turning distances. The key thing is that most of the local codes nowadays do not require retroactive. If a road's in place, then there are ways to deal with that and allow access into a facility. Go ahead, Brian. Or Ryan. As I stated, fire department access roads consist of roadways, fire lanes, parking lot lanes, and a combination of. Where they cannot be installed accordingly, there are ways to offset, as I stated. It's not retroactive, but if you're planning on building a new building and you don't meet the requirements, there are things that the AHJ may, or the authority having jurisdiction may ask you to do in putting in other fire protection features. Sprinklers are the big one. Again, going back to zoning, zero lot line buildings and that such, again, all that has to be come into play again with the 150-foot rule and with alternative fire protection features that are put into place. Go ahead. Again, placing of that fire access road is critical. The code does require that it not only do you have to meet 150 feet around the building, but within 50 feet of at least one of the exterior doors. Another thing to keep in mind with placing your roads is the fire department connection. If the building has a sprinkler system, that FDC needs to be accessible and obtainable. Like I said, there are two different hose lay options. With that option, typically the fire department is using a forward lay where they have large diameter hose and they like to put the pumper up close to the building and access that FDC to help that sprinkler system do its work. So some considerations to take into there. Go ahead. Now, as I stated, the authority having jurisdiction, depending on what fire protection features are in place, may require more access roads, and typically for subdivisions and other areas where large numbers of vehicles are in place, they will ask for two access roads so that we can have easy access first off, and that you can have easy egress out of a situation. Again, kind of it's counterintuitive to how the police think, in that they want to control everything and have limited access. But in this case, we're trying to be able to get to the facility quicker and allow people to get away when there is a situation. Go ahead. The marking of the access road is covered. The signage is regulated within the either one of the codes. The surfaces that are regulated, this will be dependent upon the information that you can obtain from the fire department. It does have to be able to carry their trucks, and they are fairly heavy. This is an engineered process, and that's something that you'll have to get with them on in when you design those roads. The markings, again, as you see signage within the code, certain size heights and lettering does come into play. Go ahead, Ryan. As I stated, the width of roads is regulated at 20 feet. No less than 20 feet is the recommended the width of a road. That is to allow vehicular traffic to pass both ways and allow a fire truck, if one is stationary and working, to allow the other one to pass by. The code does address parking on the street, in that in such instances, either the HA may require signage and allow parking on one side or no parking, and to allow that access to occur. Go ahead, Brian. Again, height is a problem, where trucks are 13 feet 6, or that's the recommended height. The trucks are about 11 feet high, but you need the ground clearance to be able to pass under there. And if that is not in place, the HA may require signage to identify those spaces where it doesn't meet the minimums of 13.6. Again, the surfaces of the road must be able to hold the loads of the trucks. They do get quite heavy, especially with some of the larger trucks carrying the extra load of water, 2.2 pounds per gallon, and some of them are up to well over 500 gallons. So they do get quite heavy. So that is regulated. Go ahead, Ryan. Next one. Turning radiuses. Turning radiuses have changed over the years. In the days, the big trucks didn't have such a big turning radius, or such a tight turning radius. In recent years, they've really worked and enhanced that turning radius, although it still does. They still aren't the Ferraris on the road. You know, they don't have that tight turning, so it is a concern once you get onto a site that you are able to make those turns with those trucks or vehicles. Now there are some smaller vehicles that are out there that are more accommodating, but you still have to keep in mind of the larger vehicles. And again, talking to the local AHJ will give you that information to be able to determine what your radiuses need to be. Go ahead, Ryan. There is language in the code on extended lengths of driveways and roads. Anything that exceeds 150 feet shall have a avenue for the apparatus to turn around, whether it be a hammerhead, or a T-turn, a U-turn, or a Y-turn. Again, keeping in mind the turning radiuses and the width and length of the vehicles in order to accommodate those vehicles. Go ahead. Again, weight restrictions on bridges, and there is a certain grade that needs to be kept in mind, especially for approaches and driveways for the trucks entering the driveways. again, different trucks are different, have different angles of departure and approach. So you have to check with with the local HJ as to what that is. But that is addressed within the addressed in the code so that they can get in and do their job. Go ahead, Ryan. And then my favorite talk, sleeping policemen. It's not just donuts the cops do. They get their sleep here and there. Although in this instance, this signage doesn't refer to the actual cop sleeping in his car. Sleeping policemen are the other things that we have to look for. And go ahead, Ryan, if you want. Which are considered traffic calming devices. Speed bumps, particularly, and speed humps are the sleeping policemen that are referred to in the signage there. The codes do address the traffic calming devices. It does say that you cannot hinder the access into or out of the facility. So those type of devices are at the discretion of the AHJ, as noted there. Keeping in mind that anytime you make the apparatus bounce with the added weight, it does play havoc upon those vehicles. And so keeping that in mind, the HJ will can many times disapprove said devices. So go ahead, Ryan. Again, like I said, obstructions to the roadways are regulated within the code. Go ahead, Ryan. Access boxes, the code does address for those facilities that, it's for any facility really, that the fire department needs to have access to anywhere in all points of a structure. And I can attest to this, that firemen are the best locksmiths in the world. They can get into anything. It's just the amount of damage that you want to incur when they do it. They're very familiar with destruction. And so many times this is the easier way of providing them access, putting in a lockbox or access boxes. I think there are many different types that are out there now. What happens is you provide the box, they put a key in there, they open the key or open the box with a provided key that they keep in their truck, and they have access to the facility. This goes for gates, and they've even gone so far as for the locking device, putting locking devices on fire department connections, where the keys that are provided in the box can access those devices and keep the rodents out and keep them from being used as hiding places. Or ill-gotten need, let's just say. Go ahead, Ryan. Water supplies, something to keep. We didn't talk a whole lot about water supplies, but again, in most cases, the code does address hydrant placing, 500 feet for commercial properties and 1,000 or up to 1,000 for residential areas. The fire flow and capability that should be maintained is a calculation that's done. I'm not going to go into it today because it's a long calculation on how to figure out the height and width and how much water is needed to get into to potentially suppress a building if there is a problem. But there are other avenues that to think of when you don't have the water, primarily dry hydrants, drafting locations, storage tanks, whatnot. But all that needs to be accessible if it's to be used by the emergency services. Go ahead, Ryan. And then questions.
All right. Great job. Excellent presentations. Thank you. Just a reminder to everybody, if they could send their questions directly to me in chat, we'll moderate them here. First question, for cameras, for both of you, basically, what's your sense on cameras? Do they provide a sense of security, or are they primarily a recorder of events that can be used after the fact?
So typically it's how you use them, right? And the resources that a site might have. So ideally you're going to have, cameras around the buildings. One, you want to make sure that all entrances, exits, and parking lots are covered. But really someone actively monitoring those situations are what's going to help that crime response. Typically what we see when we go out is someone has a camera system, it records for 30 or 60 days. That's good, but only for investigative purposes. Now, if cameras, especially being highly visible, actually deter the crime in the first place, that's kind of up in the air. But yeah, what we want to see is about 36 days of coverage and someone that actively monitors. And as technology improves and we get AI and those type of things, that becomes easier for us.
Okay, Patrick, anything to add?
Nope, I think my covered.
Okay. A lot of communities require vegetation and screening vegetative elements. Can you speak a little bit to the impacts those have on security and site access?
Yeah, so with that 2 foot, 6 foot rule, and especially keeping the items away from the building, really it's meant to increase those sight lines. So if that someone approaches the building, or if there's something that's not supposed to be there, right? So if someone wanted to have an IED, like an explosive, right, and put it up against the building, they could hide it in bushes and those are the like. And then as they're approaching on site on foot, if they can go in between trees, that makes it harder to identify them. And by the time you actually see them, they're at the building. So along those lines, you want to kind of keep it towards that. That's not to say you can't have any trees, any foliage on site. That those are obviously great to have, and it increases the beautification of the site. But maintaining them sometimes can become an issue, right? Especially if the bushes, or if you have any other low-lying plants grow up, comes up to the building windows on the first level, and that prevents the people that are occupying the building from seeing outside.
Yeah, Patrick?
Well, and for on our side, again, foliage a lot of times is used to cover up the hydrants. There is a clearance that has to be maintained around the hydrant to be able to use it. It is a requirement. Also, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll put the shrubbery or foliage up against the building, and it'll block the FDC and access to the FDC. Again, there's a maintenance and a clearance that is required in those areas, as well as egress from the building, coming out the doors and providing a space of gathering once you get out. Things to think about.
Okay. With regards to lighting, do you view that as a deterrence to crime, or what's your perspective on that? Is more lighting better, where it conflicts with limitations on lighting by communities?
Yeah, I mean, typically, if you follow those recommendations, you're in a good spot, right? So if you have a dimly lit alleyway or anything like that, you're less likely to, or the offender is perceiving that as, I'm less likely to be detected, right? So what we want is to kind of the criminal or the potential offender to rethink how they're going to go about committing this crime, and if it's even worth it to commit the crime, right? If it's risky and it's well lit and there might be cameras and I might be caught, is it really worth it to, take this risk for myself?
Okay. All right. Got a question on if in a historic area or a historic village type area, do you have any recommendations or resources that they could utilize in developing an emergency response plan, specifically to directing police and fire to the site, which is a predominantly pedestrian-oriented campus, and moving people to safety in case of an emergency? So wayfinding, delineation. And I think, Mike, maybe you can speak to your potential services with your on-site inspection that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so like I said, if you have critical infrastructure, some of these unique sites, you can reach out to our office and we could assist with that, taking a look at, what we can do. I mean, those historical sites are tricky, right? It's really a balancing act of what we can and cannot do, to keep the site kind of how it is, and also, make those modifications to assist us in the challenges that we face in the modern day. So things like signage, if you can get signage, maybe you can get signage that kind of incorporates the aesthetic of the building, but can still stand out for first responders, or if you're looking at evacuations, those type of things to help people move around. I get those are tricky, especially, we have gone to places where, they have doors that are made of wood and 100 years old, right? And we're looking at locks and things like that for, potential lockdowns if there's an active shooter. There are other ways to kind of go about it. Some, you need, clearance from the historical society. You're gonna need to go to police and fire because they might not let you just replace the door and put a lock on it, right? There are devices that assist with lockdowns, and those type of things. But once again, those are going to need fire department and fire marshal approval.
Okay. Patrick,
And like what Mike said, it does, a lot of it does depend. There are avenues, both fire codes and the building code address historic buildings, and there's a lot of leeway given to the historic building to be able to maintain that history that the building holds. So yeah, there are ways of doing it, and it does say sometimes take some massaging to get there, but I think that there is usually an avenue to be able to keep all parties happy.
okay. And Mike, if folks in that situation wanted to reach out for your assistance, they just contact you directly?
Yep, they can contact me directly, or they can contact our offices, and we can schedule a site visit, and see what we can do, and potentially see what, funding is out there to help improve those the security of those sites.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Ryan, I do not see any more questions in chat, so take it to you.
Yeah, so thank you, Patrick and Michael, for presenting and sharing your expertise and insights on the topic today. I also want to thank everyone for attending as well. Just a reminder, we have another planners gathering coming up on August 27th for special assessments. So please be on the lookout for that solicitation to register. So again, thanks for joining us today, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.